Welcome back to the Crypto World channel, everyone. My name is Josh, and in just a moment, I'll be talking about how the recent Bitcoin crash ties into this previous Bitcoin crash to help determine the potential recovery back to the upside. I will also be including important on-chain analysis later in this video, alongside the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index still sitting in extreme fear, the Bitcoin funding rates across all of these exchanges, and the stock market, as we are experiencing a bounce in the short term, which has an influence on the Bitcoin price. All of that and more in this video, so definitely stick around all the way to the end of this video so that you're not missing out on any of this important information. And just before we jump into it, make sure to leave a like on the video down below. And if you're new to the channel, you might as well subscribe with notifications turned on for more updates just like this every single day. But with all of that out of the way, let's get straight to what this video is about. So right here on the Bitcoin US dollar charts, and on the right side of your screen just here, this is the 6-hour time frame for Bitcoin showing the current price action. And on the left side of your screen, this is the 12-hour Bitcoin chart, which is zoomed into the Bitcoin crash that we experienced back in March 2020. And the reason why I'm looking at these two charts like this is because we've got a lot of similarities between these two charts. First of all, the obvious similarity is the dump to the downside. It was a very fast flash crash that formed a huge wick to the downside back in March 2020. And the exact same thing happened just recently, as you can see. And then what happened last time was the Bitcoin price came back up in an automatic reaction and then came back to the downside to form another low, but not breaking below the bottom of this wick, similar to what Bitcoin did just recently. Once again, we saw a bounce and then came back down to form another low, but not lower than this wick. And right now we have experienced another bounce back to the upside, just like what we saw back here, for example. So in this previous example for Bitcoin back in March and leading into April 2020, what happened next? Well, in the shorter term, after that initial bounce back to the upside, what we're kind of experiencing right now, over the next few days, Bitcoin did experience some sort of sideways consolidation for a little while. And that sideways consolidation could last for a couple weeks in length before we can continue the recovery back to the previous highs. And by the way, this recovery that we saw back in March 2020 leading into April 2020, that took close to 2 months in length before we finally recovered back towards the previous highs. But keep in mind, this is on the 12-hour chart on the left side of your screen, but on the right side of your screen, the current price action, this is on the 6-hour chart, which means if the Bitcoin price continues to follow along with this previous price action, but on half the time frame on the 6-hour chart instead of the 12-hour chart, then the recovery could possibly take around 1 month instead of 2 months. Now, obviously, that's just a bit of speculation because that is only going off this previous crash, so don't necessarily take that too seriously because, of course, nothing is guaranteed in these markets. But with that being said, looking in the price oscillators, they are also very similar this time around to the March 2020 crash. So while this is speculation and it is not guaranteed to play out of almost the infinite possibilities that Bitcoin can choose between, a recovery like what we saw back in March and April last year could be one of the more likely scenarios that we could pay attention to moving forward. And zooming out to the daily time frame for Bitcoin, this is a chart that I covered yesterday on the channel, and I was basically comparing the size of the recent Bitcoin crash to all of these other crashes that Bitcoin has experienced throughout its price history, to let you know that even a 30 to 40% crash to the downside is actually a very normal crash during a bull market, believe it or not. But because I covered this in depth in yesterday's Bitcoin update video, I won't go on about it again in today's video. So if you missed yesterday's Bitcoin update video, I definitely recommend you checking that one out. And just before we jump into the important on-chain analysis for Bitcoin, I'll just quickly talk about the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index, right now sitting in extreme fear again. Now, since yesterday, the value of this indicator has bounced back to the upside a little bit, but with that being said, once again, we're still in extreme fear, which historically speaking, anytime we're sitting in extreme fear, they normally come in confluence with great buying opportunities. Of course, that is not financial advice, but just jumping over to this Bitcoin chart, this is on the daily time frame. The subscribers on this channel would already know about this chart, but for the new viewers on the channel, these green zones just here on this chart shows us the time periods where the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index was sitting in extreme fear. And you can clearly see that all of these time periods just here were amazing buying opportunities. You'll notice that these amazing buying opportunities throughout Bitcoin's history come after a lot of bearish price action, usually a major crash, just like what Bitcoin has experienced over the past couple of weeks. And so as I've been telling you recently on the channel, I am accumulating more Bitcoin, especially while we're sitting in extreme fear. I let you know that at the end of September back here, and I also let you know that during this time period, back in May, June, and July in particular, I was letting you know that I'm accumulating a lot of Bitcoin at that stage, and this time is really no different. Now getting into some on-chain analysis for Bitcoin, this is the Bitcoin All Exchanges Reserve. So basically this black line just here is the Bitcoin price on the daily time frame, but the purple line just here shows us the total amount of Bitcoin sitting on exchanges. And you'll notice here, especially recently, the Bitcoin balance on exchanges is absolutely crashing to the downside. Normally when we see the largest Bitcoin crashes, like what we saw back in May, for example, we crashed around 50% to the downside in just around 1.5 weeks, and then we stayed bearish for the next next 2 to 3 months before we finally recovered. And a lot of that was due to the fact that a lot of Bitcoin was getting deposited onto exchanges, which means a lot of Bitcoin can be easily sold. And interestingly enough, around 1 to 2 days before the recent crash to the downside, when Bitcoin was still sitting up at around 56 to 57,000 US dollars per Bitcoin, this purple line just here had a decent uptick, showing that a decent amount of Bitcoin was deposited onto exchanges, which once again, when that happens, that is technically a bearish signal, showing us that that Bitcoin is likely going to be sold onto the market. But right now, the Bitcoin balance on exchanges is crashing once again to the downside. The last time we saw something like this was back during July and also during September, which of course turned out to be amazing buying opportunities if you're holding for the next few months. And especially if this continues to the downside, at some point we will enter into a supply shock, which basically means if this stays on the same trend of Bitcoin getting withdrawn from exchanges, eventually there's going to be no more Bitcoin on exchanges if this stays in the same trend, which means all of the people wanting to buy Bitcoin every single day will have no more Bitcoin to buy at the current prices. So the price would have to start rising back to the upside in order for new Bitcoin to be deposited onto exchanges, because obviously as the Bitcoin price trends higher and higher, usually more people gradually start selling a bit of their Bitcoin as the price goes higher. So essentially, if this purple line just here stays crashing to the downside, then eventually the Bitcoin price will be forced to go to the upside. And obviously, if there's less Bitcoin sitting on exchanges, that means there's less Bitcoin available to sell, which means reduced selling pressure moving forward. Now, taking a quick look at the Bitcoin funding rates across all of these exchanges, I explained exactly what these funding rates mean for Bitcoin in a recent Bitcoin update video, so definitely check that out on the channel. But right now, even as the Bitcoin price is bouncing back to the upside, the funding rates still staying negative shows us that we are potentially about to have a short squeeze on our hands, because basically when the funding rates are negative, that means the majority of positions across these exchanges are short positions. And as the Bitcoin price bounces further to the upside, that forces the shorts to close their short positions, which then pushes up the Bitcoin price, because to close a short position, you need to buy back into Bitcoin, which then would force more short positions to close, pumping the Bitcoin price even higher. And that's basically what a short squeeze is. So we can use the negative funding rate right now as a potential indicator of a short squeeze if the Bitcoin price either continues with a short-term bounce to the upside or even experiences somewhat sideways consolidation. Because as long as the price is not going to the downside, if we're just going sideways, then on negative funding rates, the short positions are still losing money. So this is definitely something that I am keeping an eye on right now. And on top of that, of course, I'm keeping an eye on the stock market. This is actually the Dow Jones, because out of the recent bounces in the US markets, for example, in the S&P 500, the Nasdaq, and the Dow Jones did experience the largest bounce to the upside yesterday. And it was great to see we held this upwards trending line of support. And I'll let you know nearly one full day ago about this bounce in the stock market, saying that this is what we need to see before we can expect crypto to start flipping bullish again and seeing a bounce to the upside as well. And then in a matter of hours after I posted that tweet saying that we could see a bounce in the crypto markets if we're seeing a bounce in the stock market, what do you know? Crypto did indeed see a bounce back to the upside after the stock market experienced a bounce back to the upside. So this just proves yet again why it is important to at least keep an eye on the stock market, because at this point it is obvious that crypto and the stock market is at least somewhat correlated. But with that being said, the Dow Jones is currently forming an ascending broadening wedge pattern, which is technically a bearish pattern. But as for most bearish patterns out there, we don't really flip bearish until we finally break below this support, which by the way is coming in at around 34,000 on the Dow Jones. But looking at the Nasdaq and also looking at the S&P 500, we are not seeing the same ascending broadening wedge pattern as we are seeing on the Dow Jones, which is good news for the S&P 500, for the Nasdaq, and for the crypto markets. And by the way, if you want to get extra crypto updates throughout the day, just like this, for example, definitely make sure you follow me over on my Twitter, and the link to my Twitter account is in the description down below and also in the pinned comments. And if you enjoyed this video or got something valuable out of it, please make sure to leave a like down below. And if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe with notifications turned on for more updates just like this every single day. As always, I really do appreciate all of your support in the channel at the moment. I can't thank you guys enough. And before you click off, make sure you're checking out one of these uploads if you haven't already. I've got a trading tutorial video and a passive income video over here. So if you're serious about making a lot of money in the crypto markets, these videos can potentially help you do that. But anyway, that is it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in the next video.